like they say, the wild, wild west, or because we're at the beginning of the information age, we act as a society like we live in 1983. I use 1983 because of George Orwell, that talked about dystopia or Orwellian societies where technology is used by the oppressors to manipulate. We act as if there is no such thing as cyberspace. Now, that's very exaggerated for me to say, but we as a society act like this stuff's not going on unless I'm being targeted or a loved one. Then all of a sudden, I now subscribe to these iPredators. But it's this, if it's not, if I'm not getting targeted or my loved one, it doesn't exist. And
that's not going to work.
That is one of the downsides of society in general. And this gets into my whole other construct, and maybe we can do a show on it, which I authored back in 2006, which is dark psychology, which is the study of the dark side of human consciousness, which is dark psychology is a construct that addresses those aspects within all of us that has nothing to do with technology. But if technology is there and we're activating and actively engaged in the dark psychology, well, of course we're going to use technology. But dark psychology speaks to not just Freudian id, but it speaks to those aspects within all of us, which by the grace of God, most of us don't act upon it, but many do. That's dark psychology. And it is, we have to, just like Anonymous, but we as non-anonymous members, we as those in the psychology and psychiatry, it's not all about mental illness, for crying out loud.
Right.
There are people, and I don't like to use this term because, I am not Unitarian, but I'm open to all religious dogmas, is evil. Judeo-Christianity calls them Satan and Lucifer. Yeah. Islamic Muslims call them Shaitan. Right. All of them, from a religious dogma standpoint, speak to the evil, depraved aspects of the human condition. I personally, I don't subscribe to these external entities, whether it be Shaitan, whether it be Satan, Lucifer, whatever. I believe that evil is where? It's between our ears. Right. We can't blame it on these, these ghosts. I believe, this is my only personal opinion, it's us.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. But maybe we needed an external representation of that because it was too painful to point to ourselves and say we all have the capacity to do something evil or be evil in certain situations. Some people live for it, love it. They enjoy it. I'm a panelist. I call myself a spell checker on an occasional show called The Evil Show. But it's not evil. Nobody on it's evil. It's just, it's funny that it's even called The Evil Show. There's an irony in the title alone. But the main host of the show, Guy Shea, he's a fighter, and he'll fight anybody. And part of it's character, part of it's real. I don't know how much I know about this guy, but I believe deep down he's got a big heart. And because I have communications with him offline and online. He plays a character online, but of course some of his real person is going to come out, and you get to guess, just like I get to guess, how much of what he's saying on his show is really Guy and how much isn't. I've told people before that what we are is an animal. We're an animal. And we have this civilized human layer on top. Now, if you want to see the animal, walk up to a mother pushing her baby carriage, which I would never do, and slap her baby in the face. And watch the animal come out. The animal will come out first, 911 call later. That animal is always waiting right underneath the surface. In a healthy human mind, that animal will defend loved ones, will defend innocent people, will defend oneself. But in an unhealthy one, that animal may decide to go on the hunt for specific targets or non-specific targets in a variety of ways. And that's something we always have to be on the lookout for, unfortunately.
And what environment now Do they do this in? Well, what is the definition of cyberspace? An abstract, digital, artificial environment. It's all an illusion. And of course, the dark side in us, of course, the evil folks in this world, they're going to take the path of least, resistance. Absolutely. So if I'm a true psychopath, serial killer, of course I'm going to use cyberspace because hell, you don't know who I am.
That's right.
But as it relates to religion, I personally, I have nothing against atheists. I have nothing against, I believe in God, I also believe in evolution. I don't take issue to faith. I take no issue to any religious dogma. What I take issue to are religious zealots, religious militants, and those that practice blind faith, to where now their religious beliefs, ideology, now all of a sudden, well, if you're not in my religious group, Mr. Kevin, and if you don't subscribe to my notions of my religion, well, guess what? You are going to burn in hell. I'm going to ostracize you, and you need to be, taken down. Because why? You're not right with not God, but you're not right with my God.
That's right.
And that's where I take issue with religion. But outside of that, religion is wonderful.
Yeah.
The other issue I have religion, and it's not an issue, I just wish they would help. Religion, because they have the attention, whether you want to call it a congregation, a parish, ministry, whatever, for those people that are actively religious and engaged in attending services and congregations, I just wish, priests and the mullahs and the minister and the reverends would speak to their, I was brought up Catholic. I just wish they would speak to the congregants and their parishioners about the dark side of cyberspace.
Yeah. Well, give them time. Now, religion is a slow-moving creature. I think give them some time. Give them 10 or 15 years, and I'll bet that will be part of the main dialogue going on between congregations and their leaders. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's even slower moving than that. But they have to factor it in eventually, because this is how people are touching one another now. Didn't used to be that way. But this type of touching, like any kind of touching, can turn violent. And it can turn dangerous. And it can turn evil in its broader sense. And I think religions, all of them really, that take themselves seriously, save for Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, are going to have to address cyberspace and stuff that's happening in cyberspace eventually, and it's going to become, I think, part of the mainstream conversation. But who knows? I'm just guessing that that's where they'll go with that.
Well, what's interesting about, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
Well, what's interesting about site, and anybody can go there, is it's now close to 2 years. It's the only fictitious thing I've ever written, but it's at iPredator. It's a parable. It's a short story, very short, probably 6 or 7 pages, and it's called "I Am iPredator." I am iPredator. And it's a parable, and it is Lucifer, Satan, it's evil, who is sending us humans a letter of thanks. And what he's telling us, he's thanking us and he's saying in this letter to us, is you idiot humans have you're treating each other with such deception, such awful vitriol and venom to each other. What have you done to me? What have you done, humanity? You have created a portal for my return. So in my parable, it is Lucifer writing us a letter of saying thank you. But it's, now
I love that. I've got to read that.
It's called I Am iPredator. It's the only. But from that, which I've learned is, and I wrote that 2 years ago, and it still is the second most downloaded page on my website.
Oh, wow.
And since writing it, I Am iPredator, is I've been contacted over the last 2 years, through telephone and through, emails from people of the cloth, people from various different denominations, minister, reverends, where 9 of them over the last 2 years. to where, and even if you read I am my predator, I write at the bottom, it's a parable. And
Right.
when they've contacted me and I say to them, well, they're like, well, Dr. Nucitelli, we know that.
Mhm.
But what they have presented, all 9 of them have said to me that they believe it is a metaphor of what's going on.
Mhm.
And, now if you subscribe to the notion of Armageddon, of Antichrist, of, evil returning, okay, this is what they believe, even though it's a parable and it's fictional. All 9 of them have said to me that, yes, Dr. Nucitelli, it's not literal. We know it's a parable, it's fictitious, but they believe that this is what's happening because they know that the way we're dealing with each other in cyberspace borders evil, just like what these trolls are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. But, this worries me too, because if cyberspace weren't here, that almost implies that we'd be a better people. So do we have so little self-control as a species that once we get an avenue for evil, we're going to necessarily use it?
I think if we were to go pre-information age, if we were to go to the beginning of human civilization, let's only go back to Egyptian times.
Hmm.
Can't prove any of this. Even though I study history, religions, theology, I love, religious archaea. I love all that stuff to try to understand. But if we go back, let's say 1,000 years, let's go back to ancient Sumer. I have a sense that even back then, there were the same amount of deviance, same amount of violent, abusive folks.
Hmm.
It's just now, and I can't prove it, I believe there's a higher percentage of what I call predators because of this artificial abstract environment called cyberspace.
Right.
It is, and this is something else that I'm researching, is I believe, and I don't want, well, your listeners are going to call me crazy. The trolls are definitely going to call me crazy, is that I believe, and not to sound crazy to you, is that I believe cyberspace and the way we interact with it is an extension of human consciousness. Not in a delusional sense, but if you were to take an image of the internet, and if you were to take an image of the 1.1 to 1.3 trillion neuronal connections within the brain, you put them side by side, I've done it. Guess what? They look exactly the same. Exactly the same. Yeah, and to get real crazy, you take a look at Hubble and the expanding universe, and the universe, that looks the same as the other two, but that's neither here nor there. But this is where I believe cyberspace is extension of human consciousness. In essence, it is mirroring, it's paralleling the way our brain functions.
Yeah. I don't think that's crazy at all. I think that makes perfect sense.
I think it's a little crazy. I think once, it may take me to 30 to 40 years, but, and that's the eccentric side of me, but I believe that's what's happening. And because that's occurring, our mind, and God, I am a disciple and groupie, God rest his soul, of Carl Jung.
Mm-hmm.
Carl Jung was the youngest of the 3 fathers of modern psychology. You have Sigmund Freud, then younger to him, where I did my doctoral degree, is at Adler University, Alfred Adler.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the younger of the 3, who to me is by far the most profound, is Carl Jung.
Yeah.
And what Carl Jung talked about is the collective unconscious.
Yes.
And what the collective unconsciousness is the thread that we all share.
Yeah.
And that, even when I say collective, I start to choke up because it's just so amazing. And I just wish, Kevin, I wish that Carl Jung was around now so he could tell me what the hell is going on with cyberspace.
I wonder what B.F. Skinner would say, to be honest with you, but I think we might be surprised. I think they'd be a little baffled, but maybe it's just as simple as you suggested. I don't think you said, but that the internet is a wide open ocean that everybody is now free to swim in, and you're going to see their natural selves come out. Maybe before the internet, they didn't really have an avenue to show their entire personalities, or they had to be more restrained or restricted and relegate themselves just to whatever their fantasy might have been in their own head.
Exactly, Kevin. When I first
You there, Doc?